Good Friday morning. Welcome inside Mr. Small's Theater. This is Geick's Got Game, and I am your host, Matt Geica. Back with you for the next hour here on the River's Edge, and you can find us at riversedgepgh.com. We are streaming live on Facebook as well with our video format. You can find that too at riversedgepgh.com/live. In case you haven't watched this show or listened to this show in the past, I am a reporter and analyst for DKPittsburghSports.com during the day. At night, I just try to keep my one-year-old corralled at the house. That's been a challenge lately. But I'm a sports junkie, but I try to think about sports in a different way. And I try to position arguments in ways that you might not usually see on sports radio. So I do that not just on this show, but also on social media. You can find me at Matt Geica, MattGajtka on Twitter. I am Matt Geica Media on Facebook as well. I usually share most of my work, if not all of my work, at those two platforms. And the Facebook live stream is on my Facebook page too, coincidentally enough. This week's show is about two warring factions, if you will. And I've often talked about on this program the concept that there's only so much time, only so much energy for people to pay attention to sports. And part of that just goes back to the number of hours in the day. Part of it is just having the mental capacity to follow something. It takes more, I think, energy these days to follow a sport than it used to because there's so much more information out there. It's not just the broadcast of the games on TV and radio. It's also online journalism. It's also blogs. It's also social media. There's a lot to it. So I feel like there's less room for the casual fan and more room for the person in question to dig into one thing in particular. And in some cases that helps certain industries like the one that I'm in. I think that does help with the focus that we have at DK Pittsburgh Sports on hockey and on the Penguins especially. I think that lifts the boat for all of us at the site, and it just provides more reason for people to stick around and to stay on the website and continue to click on things. However, on the other side of the coin, if you don't have that popularity right now, it's tough to really edge your way in. And I feel like right now, the sport of basketball is having a difficult time in the city of Pittsburgh. And so many times this argument is positioned as, is there room for an NBA team in Pittsburgh? I don't think so. Pittsburgh is the 22nd largest media market in America, give or take, somewhere in that range. I think having three major professional teams, the Penguins, the Pirates, and the Steelers, is plenty. And I don't see there being the amount of corporate dollars in the market to sponsor a team, to put the money into buying corporate suites. Say if they were to play at PPG Paints Arena, this hypothetical NBA team, you have to think about that. You have to think about all the sponsorship money that has to be made in order to break even. It's not just about selling tickets, and I think that would be an issue as well with the Penguins here in town and with the Penguins having established their brand to such a great degree over the past decade especially. But the Penguins have been here for 50 years, and any new team that would come in that would try to attract attention, even if it is in a major league. I know the Pittsburgh Power of arena football tried for a while, didn't work out. You could say, well, they're minor league, so that's why it didn't work. For me, there isn't really the fan base volume. There isn't the numbers available. There aren't the numbers available to have enough people to be diehard Pittsburgh basketball fans from a pro perspective. But you know what? You go back about 10 or 15 years when the Penguins were down and Pitt basketball was up, you could say hoops was right there with hockey in the area. And in terms of both fan interest and people buying tickets to go out to the games, the Peterson Event Center was the place to be as Jamie Dixon took over for Ben Howland. And there wasn't much of a stepping stone there. There wasn't much of a bridge to cross. The success continued on, and the team was making NCAA tournaments. And up until the time that Sidney Crosby arrived in Pittsburgh, you could have made an argument that both those entities, Pitt basketball and Penguins hockey, were pretty close to the same page. But as for right now, it's not even close. And I hate to position Pitt basketball as one singular thing because Pitt athletics is more of that big tent, big umbrella. But in this case, when you are comparing the two winter sports that play concurrently for the most part, with the size of the town and with the way the Penguins have taken over, it feels like to me there's not enough room in this town for both. And so for right now, basketball remains a niche sport from the college perspective, and it doesn't help basketball either. that the Pitt program has fallen off to such a degree. They have 11 new faces in the lineup this year, looking like it's going to be a really, really down season for Pitt hoops, one that we haven't really seen this century. And then you see a team like Duquesne men's basketball trying to get on the rise. Duquesne women's basketball has been successful lately, but both the men and the women over at the Palumbo Center, they're always fighting for what's left when Pitt already has its share at the table. And then you have Robert Morris out in Moon Township as well, which has made a couple of NCAA tournaments in the past decade or so, and Andy Toole's a great coach. He's been able to recruit pretty well for a mid-major in almost, you want to call him a low-major program in the Northeast Conference. But they're picking up what Duquesne and Pitt leave behind for the most part. And there's also the fact that the real flagship program at Robert Morris should be the men's hockey team, because they've done better in recent years than the men's basketball team, even though basketball, college basketball, is a bigger deal nationally than college hockey. And still, college hockey is trying to get its toes into the ground here in Pittsburgh. But from my perspective, I don't see a way for both to thrive. This isn't Philadelphia. And I was talking to one of my colleagues at DK Pittsburgh Sports, Chris Mueller, who now covers Pitt athletics and will be doing some college basketball coverage for us. He's from Philadelphia. And I said, what does Pittsburgh college basketball have to do to get anywhere close to where Philadelphia is? And he just laughed. And I knew it was a bizarre, probably far-fetched question, and a question that doesn't really have an answer. But when you have the Big Five in Philadelphia, you have all those traditional schools, you have essentially what is the birthplace of modern college basketball in the Palestra, the great facility in Philly. But Philly also has so many more people in the region, not just in the urban metro area, but also in the surrounding areas. I believe Philadelphia is in the top 5 in terms of market size in America. So you can have a great, thriving basketball culture, and you can also have a great, thriving hockey culture. Philadelphia has produced some NHL talent, and I think that would spill over into New Jersey as well if you want to take part of that, part of central New Jersey in addition to eastern Pennsylvania. But the Flyers have a terrific fan base, no matter what people around here may think about the Flyers themselves and the type of hockey they traditionally have liked to play. But the Flyers are much like the Penguins, a very, very vociferous and energetic, and in a lot of cases, bloodthirsty fan base, more bloodthirsty than the Penguins fan base because of the way the two teams have operated. But in Philadelphia, there is room for that. And to be a true four-sport town, and when you're talking about hockey and basketball, because they play concurrently, like I said, you just have to have the numbers. And for me, it is a numbers game in this case. I know that there are some great basketball fans in Pittsburgh, some great college basketball fans especially. And as we've seen in the past, when Pitt does well, that place up in Oakland, the Pete, is an awesome spot to be and one of the more energetic venues in our region. If not the most energetic when everything is going great because of the size of it, because of the intimacy of it. I think it's an awesome spot to watch college basketball, but the product hasn't been there in recent years. And with the Penguins sucking up all the oxygen and selling out every home game for more than 10 years now, just think about that in terms of dollars too, where discretionary income goes if you are a local sports fan. If you want to go to a Penguins game, number one, the demand is tougher, so you might say, well, we can just go down to catch Pitt basketball. But the Penguins have become the place to be, and PPG Paints Arena has become the place to be. And if you're not going to the games, you're probably watching on TV. I don't think it can be underestimated how long the Penguins have had this run where they've had just increasing levels of success. They've had telegenic stars. It's all been working in their favor. And you do have what the Penguins have also had, too, in an advantage, is having the older generation, which was already hockey fans, Generation Xers, and even before that, like my parents' generation, the baby boomers. They may not have been huge hockey fans in the late 60s and throughout the 70s, or even until Mario Lemieux showed up, but they sure got on board once 66 came to town, and then once 68 came to town. And then, of course, you had the run of playoff appearances, if not the number of Stanley Cups that many people in this area might have thought that they would get with Lemieux and Yager. But there was just that short span, and then right back at it with Crosby and Malkin. So there wasn't this long wait like, say, the Edmonton Oilers had, to use an example from the same sport, between Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier and now Connor McDavid. That was about 25 years. In Pittsburgh, Mario actually played with Sidney Crosby, even though Mario wasn't at the peak of his game. But the Penguins only had 2 or 3 years, well, 3 if you want to count the lockout season, which I will for these purposes. So they had 3 down years where they were out of the playoffs, and they weren't really that interesting as a team because Mario was hurt. They were trading off a lot of their stars, Alexei Kovalev, Martin Straka among them, and they were trying to rebuild or at least position themselves to be in a spot where they could get at the top of the draft, and they did, and it succeeded. It was a gambit, it was a gamble, but it helped them get a new arena too. So the Penguins are in a great spot, and as for local college basketball, it's going to be a real fight right now. Maybe, as I'm about to talk about with my featured guest on today's show, Zach Weiss, who covers Duquesne athletics and Duquesne basketball for the Did You See That network and also A10 Talk. I think Duquesne actually has the best chance to chip into that and get people to pay attention to college basketball because of a good hire they made in Keith Dambrot. Hey, he's got connections to LeBron James as well. And for once, with Pitt way down, with Robert Morris being kind of in limbo there, this is Duquesne's chance, I think, maybe their best chance in recent memory to take that top spot. And they'll get a chance to once again win the city game coming up on December the 1st down at PPG Paint, speaking of that facility. So if they can win that game, then suddenly I think a lot of people in Pittsburgh's antenna are up for the Dukes, and they'll see what they can do. We'll talk more about Duquesne basketball on the other side of this break on the River's Edge. Going to be with you. I'm Matt Geica. You are listening to, or watching, if you are, thank you for watching. Geik's Got Game is the name of the program, and I will return after this break featuring some great local artists here on the River's Edge.
Hey River's Edge listeners, Alex here from the Mike Sasson Show, and boy have I got to tell you about Salon 22, a small local business located right here in Millville. I got my hair colored there about 2 weeks ago, and I still can't stop staring at myself. They use this awesome new technique called color melting to make me look like a mermaid. But don't worry, if mermaid hair isn't your thing, they'll meet all your hair goals, with things like balayage, rose gold, unicorn hair, ombre, as well as monochromatic color, which is your standard basic coloring. Seriously, they do it all, and they do it good. Check Salon 22 out on Facebook and mention this ad when you make your appointment to receive a free color lock service to help preserve your color. It's a $20 value for free. I'm not kidding. Book your appointment now by calling 412-822-7222. That's 412-822-7222.
Back inside Mr. Small's Theater for period number 2 of Geik's Got Game on this Friday, November the 11th, 2017. Happy Veterans Day to all the vets out there. A good buddy of mine from high school just got back from a 10-year stint in the Army, and I'm so proud of him for all the work he put in. He was overseas a couple of times, now transitioning back to civilian life. Don't forget about your veterans. Don't forget about your friends who are in the armed forces in any form or fashion. When they come back, that's the toughest transition for so many of them. So I think that is important. The most important part of Veterans Day is to try to make sure that these people feel welcomed back and that they can transition and be part of civilian life again. That is always the biggest challenge, or mostly the biggest challenge for many of them. So important to remember on a day like this, or any day, really. When you go to all these sporting events, you see so many of these ceremonies before games for vets or during games, but let's not forget them for sure. So this day, a good day to remember that. Thanks for watching Geik's Got Game, or listening to it if you are on our live stream. We're on, well, so many formats now. The River's Edge, PGH.com, or River's Edge, PGH.com, without the at the start, is the best way to find us online. But we are streaming on, what are we on, Brian Crawford? I know we have several ways to access the program.
So TuneIn Radio.
TuneIn, I couldn't remember that
Rivers
one.
RiversEdgePGH.com, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, and we're looking at some other new options as well, so stay tuned for that.
However you might be able to
YouTube as well.
Find us. YouTube, yeah, there you go. So I wasn't lying. Several different possibilities. Joining me on the guest line right now, my featured guest, my expert witness of the day. When it comes to college basketball, I usually talk to this man, and especially when it comes to Duquesne basketball, which, like I said, is in a very good position going into this season. And from the men's perspective, they start tomorrow, but college hoops starts in earnest this weekend. His name is Zach Weiss, and he's covered Duquesne hoops, men's and women's, for the Did You See That network. Also, he's writing for A10Talk.com. Zach, what's up, man? And thank you for joining us on Gike's Got Game.
Of course, Matt, and happy Veterans Day to everybody that proudly serves our country and flies the flag. And, of course, a belated congratulations to you, Matt, for taking over the Penguins beat. Matt didn't pay me to say this, but he busts his butt every day, and it's a well-deserved honor.
Thank you, Zach. Well, that's a really good segue because I talked about hockey versus basketball in the first segment. And you and I are in different worlds in the wintertime. I know that we often come together, or we have come together over baseball with the Pirates. We've covered the Pirates together. But when it's fall and winter and early spring, I'm doing my hockey thing, you're doing your basketball thing for the most part. So what is your take on whether the two sports can thrive in Pittsburgh together? Is there enough room, whether it be from a money standpoint, from just a pure population standpoint, from an interest standpoint, for both of these sports to maximize their impact in Pittsburgh?
I could easily see where the first year would make sense, where there would be enough interest for people to come from a basketball standpoint, but then I think it falls off. And then after that, I look at things more from a facility standpoint, actually, Matt, and you look at PPG Paints Arena. If that's where you want to house a professional basketball team, that becomes difficult because you have the Penguins, you have Robert Morris, which has been playing some games there. You have Duquesne, which might have a facility change. Maybe not. That's not being reported either way. That could come into play. So even from a facility standpoint, where are you going to stick them? The convention center, that makes no sense. CCAC, that makes no sense. Converting PNC to a basketball court doesn't make much sense.
That doesn't work either.
Making the Peterson Event Center or the Palumbo Center an NBA court doesn't make much sense either. So I just don't see the fit. And in the long term, I just don't see enough interest to sustain the financial investment that would follow suit for it.
What about college basketball? I hate to lump everything together because Pitt fans aren't necessarily Duquesne fans, and those aren't necessarily Robert Morris fans. In fact, they tend to dislike each other. But just the college basketball fan base generally in Pittsburgh, what's your feel for where it is right now? And is it as engaged as it's ever been, or were there better days in the past?
I definitely think there right now are better days in the past because you look at where these teams are at right now. Robert Morris is trying to pick up pieces right now. Pitt is trying to pick up pieces right now. And Duquesne right now is, even though the future is looking bright, they're trying to pick things up right now. So you have an anxious fan base that's hungry, but they're understanding, I think, of where the teams are at right now in the grand scope and scheme of things. So I think you really look at it from a big picture perspective, and this year there will be a lot of growing pains in the city, but the city of Pittsburgh has a lot of very, very faithful basketball fans that support one, two, or maybe all three programs. So I think the future is bright, but I think at this moment right now, I think that there could be better times to be had.
Zach Weiss is our guest. He's my guest on Gike's Got Game right now on the River's Edge. And Zach, do you agree with my premise that Duquesne men's basketball has a real opportunity to seize the top of the mountain here in Pittsburgh from the college basketball perspective? You have that, what has been considered by the national college hoops community, a really good hire in Keith Dambrot after they had that protracted coaching search and coaches supposedly turning them down left and right. But then you get an up-and-comer, it appears, in Dambrot, who has the connection to Duquesne as well. And he has the success in his recent past with Akron. And then you have Pitt down to the degree that we think it will be. So doesn't this feel like the real opportunity for the Dukes?
Absolutely. I definitely think so. First of all, from a grand scheme of conference, it's going to be much easier to find success towards the top of the mountain in the Atlantic 10 versus the ACC. Let's just cut to the chase there first and foremost. But right now, Pitt fans are debating after 1 year, is this the right hire in Kevin Stallings? And maybe that's a little bit unfair after 1 year to make, but you definitely could at least make a case for it. At least in the case with Duquesne, with the coaching change, it seems like it's coming at a time where maybe there's going to be a facilities change or some kind of improvement coming very, very soon, and you want to have a coach on board for that. I know right now it seems a little bit bleak in some respects on Duquesne's end because there's only 8 healthy scholarship bodies on the team that can play right now, and then there's the 2 walk-ons. So in that sense, it's tough, but there's definitely the right man at the helm for it. Keith Dambrot is exactly what the athletic department wants from a coach right now, and they've paid him accordingly, which I think a lot of fans believe that maybe Duquesne isn't committed to winning at the athletics level, especially at the basketball level where it's the flagship. I mean, that's definitely not the problem at the women's basketball level. It started with Susie McConnell-Serio and it's continued with Dan Burke, but on the men's level for 40 plus years now, I mean, in some respects, Ron Everhart may be an exception, there's been some wondering, and I think that some questions were answered, but at the end of the day, you could have John Wooden on the sideline, and if you don't win games at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything. So is it a good coaching hire? Yes. Are the fans rightfully excited for now? Yes, they should be. But again, the time will tell, and Keith Dambrot said himself, I mean, everything sounds great, but if you can't win at Duquesne, then really what good is it?
You make a good point about basketball being the sport at Duquesne. It's not like at Robert Morris where hockey and hoops have gone neck and neck over the past few years, and you could debate whether hockey or basketball is the so-called flagship out in Moon Township. And then at Pitt, you're always going to have football right there, and football might have a slight edge right now just because of performance, but it's not a huge edge, I don't think, even though Pat Narduzzi had built some good interest, I would say, some momentum in his first 2 years. We'll see about years 3 and 4 here as year 3 comes to an end. But at Duquesne, if you do want to make an impact athletically, it is basketball. So how do you think Keith Dambrot is a fit to carry the flag for Duquesne athletics in this way?
I think Keith Dambrot is connected in all of the right ways. First of all, I mean, the first thing I remember from Atlantic 10 Media Day is that, look, we don't have a football conference, men's and women's, and I stress and women's basketball is a focal point in our conference. And I think Keith Dambrot has the connections. As much as everybody likes to make fun of the LeBron James connection, it's there. He's played a part. I mean, people are wearing his shoes on Duquesne's team. I mean, he's well connected in that sense. Duquesne's a LeBron school, but Keith Dambrot opens up the recruiting pipeline. Better recruits are coming in than what came in before. He is well connected to the fans. His father obviously knew the university very, very well, and Keith remembers memories of that and mentioned that in the press conference. So you look at it from that sense. You look at the fact that fans are energized. He hasn't exactly, although he's really busted his butt in the office trying to recruit and trying to get to know his players and even convince guys to stay, he's made his way out there. He's done town halls with fans. He's engaged with the fans. He's curious about what the fan temperature is. And the response is there. It's not just Duquesne season ticket holders for the last 40 years that are coming to these events. People are making the trip 3-4 hours from Columbus, Ohio. I mean, this is unprecedented stuff to see it this consistently and to see it this early. Fans are excited. He's captured the excitement, and you look on the sidelines and you see a guy. I mean, I'm 5'6". He's probably right around my height, just yelling the entire game to the point that he's losing his voice. He cares, point blank, offense and defense. He cares. And that's really what I think Duquesne fans are getting a glimpse of right now.
A nice win to keep Mike Lewis around town, too. He'll be, I'm sure, at the forefront of that rebuild for Duquesne, a program that's been, as Zach just told you, very much in transition over the years. What about women's basketball, Zach? You mentioned it in the A-10. It is a big deal. You have Dan Burt, who's had so much success there, and 2 years ago, what a breakthrough season for them. I think just in awareness in Pittsburgh, people realizing that there's a good thing going there at Duquesne. And you have Dan Burt in charge there. You have Susie McConnell-Serio up in Oakland at Pitt, and she comes from Duquesne, of course. That was her previous stop. And Charlie Buscaglia out at Robert Morris, taking over for his father, Sal, who had the reins for that program for so long. What's the best women's program? What's the women's program that you think is going to have the most success in 2017-18?
Really, and I'm not trying to belittle the question, success is very varied. I think that Pitt's going to have, I don't want to say a lot of trouble this year. Hopefully they have a better year. It'd be great for the city, but I'm not as optimistic about Pitt as I am the other two schools. I think in some respects you have a little bit of rebuild on the Robert Morris end in some respects. So I really do look at Duquesne with the NEC. At least there is still some winnable games, but a couple notable seniors gone on Robert Morris's end. And really, Duquesne last year, 18-16 would be good for a lot of teams, but definitely not Duquesne, and it's not up to the standard of play that they really showed, as you mentioned, 2 years ago. And I think that last year it was just a case of they had a foreign tour after the NCAA, and that logs miles before the season even starts, and it almost undid the head start. You're predominantly traveling on the road during non-conference to try to build your schedule in RPI, and it really, really backfired. And in some cases, it built, okay, we're in these moments and we know how to win. This will teach us, but they weren't finishing enough of those moments. And they kind of, by January, you don't want to say autopilot, but they were exhausted. They were very, very exhausted, and they were able to make the run they did in Atlantic 10. I think it was just muscle memory, and it was just competitive. Let's bottle it up for 3 games, but I think it last year taught everybody a lesson. Coach Dan Burt, the entire staff, the players, everybody, that you can't be on 12 months a year, 24 hours a day. Everybody, and I mean everybody, needs a break. And I think the ability to hit the refresh button has really, really raised the intensity in practices. And you see that the ladies are really practicing hard. Nobody's spot in the starting lineup is necessarily safe because the depth is there. And there is one player, Hallie Bovell, who's redshirting this year, and she brought it on herself. She said, "Coach, I want a redshirt this year. Why do you want a redshirt?" "Because I want to get better." And they're working on things with her game to where she could be in her very, very best form next year. And that's just the type of team that this is. It's a selfless group of individuals that comes together from all corners of the world for one common goal, and that's to win. And they were very disappointed by how last season was. They remember the bus ride back from Richmond after the A-10 championship loss to Dayton. And this is a team that's hungry and doesn't want that to happen again. And they're hungry. And as Dan Burt kept saying at A-10 Media Day, they're ready to play right now. And I guess they get their chance at 5:30 tonight.
The one thing that basketball and hockey does have in common, they do have in common with each other, is they're increasingly international games. I do love that you brought up the fact that there's so much of a European and African influence, an Asian influence in basketball, and hockey has always had the European influence, but basketball really is a world game now. It's very much on par with soccer in that way. They're right there neck and neck as far as I'm concerned in terms of the variety of backgrounds and nationalities that you get in these sports. Zach, I want to talk some journalism stuff with you really quick before we go. And thanks again for joining me. You took it upon yourself to start a GoFundMe page, wasn't it, to help fund your Duquesne coverage, to provide as much as you can for DYST.com, for A10Talk.com. What inspired you to do that? And what did you think about the response that you got?
Well, first of all, I'd like to issue a small correction to my last answer. The game tonight is actually 5 p.m., not 5:30.
Oh, come on, Zach. You're going to make us miss the first half.
It's, I've wanted a daylight savings time myself, but I guess I'm falling backwards half an hour instead of an hour. I'm sorry. I guess that's a half performance too. But
we forgive you.
I was just inspired. I mean, I think that I have a unique voice as a journalist, especially covering Duquesne, that I've built an integrity. Now this being my 3rd full season, which is really as sad as this, I don't want to say as sad as it sounds, but it's the most tenured active on the Duquesne beat right now. And I'd like to think that I've built a respect among the coaches, among the fans, among the necessary administrators, and among the fans, where my articles challenge the reader and I take a different look at things. It's not, I don't write a recap just to write a recap, just to get words down. And I don't view the beat as a chore, as a job. I view it as a privilege every day to challenge the readers for something else, just like Twitter challenges people with 280 characters. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I just think that I have a unique voice that earned the respect, and I feel that it warranted a GoFundMe to try to get myself to do more and to challenge myself to do more on this beat. And the fan response has been, for the most part, pretty good. I'm still looking for some business things, and I'm trying not to spam Twitter and spam Facebook and do it respectfully. And I think I've kind of taken the last week off on it, but I'm definitely still actively looking. I think that the goal that I set for myself was realistic, not ambitious, but it comes down to trying to find the businesses to come with that. And I think in some ways, I mean, it's the same way as selling an advertisement, just maybe in a little bit less of an under the rug kind of a way, where it's not just we're looking at advertisers. I'm looking at advertisers, and instead of charging a flat rate, I'm charging you a flat rate, but I'm telling you exactly what you're getting for it. I'm not BSing you. I'm not trying to gyp you out of anything. This is what you're going to get for your money, and you know that it's going in a proper place. So unconventional in some sense, yes and no, but I think it's something that's successful, and very much it could be the future.
I think so too, and we're seeing this. There's a man with a website down in Nashville, a journalist, a radio host, who has taken a similar approach and created his own website in that way, but it's just him. He makes it a small club. You get his phone number if you sign up, if you do subscribe. I don't know if you're going that far, Zach. Are you willing to text with your fans if they if they do subscribe?
If you guys
VIP?
want to reach me, my number is 867-5309. Oh, wait, that's Jenny's. I'm sorry. No, sorry. I can give you Jenny's number, though.
Oh, wow. So you're not quite willing to go that far, but it is, it's the state of journalism right now. You want to make it a unique product, right? And you want to make it stand out. So as you mentioned, you feel like your voice is different, and you feel like you've also built up some equity there with the Duquesne fans, and I think you definitely have. One last thing, you mentioned it, you already talked about it, the 280 characters on Twitter. You've come out in favor of it. I'm in favor of it. I've seen some Twitter purists, so to speak, say that they long for the days of the 140 character limit. I think for journalists, personally, it's great because we can include more detail if we're linking a story, or you don't have to do a string of tweets where one would do in order to throw some news out there as well.
Well, sure. And for those who like the 140 character model, you can still tweet at 140
That's true.
characters.
No one preventing you.
There's no penalty. There's no violation against tweeting 140 characters. It's totally your choice. And if you want to lampoon with 280, you can lampoon with 280. But I think the 280 is good for certain professions and certain people. And you and I, as sports journalists and sports media, I think it's perfect. As you said, you can tease the article. You can tease an article. You can provide more in-depth thoughts, which challenge your reader, which encourage more interaction, the whole SMS thing, the whole social media sensation. So I think it's really, really encouraging for our profession. I think it's a step forward, and it's a good move for the sign of the times right now, where people are more information driven than ever before. I think that it's a perfect marriage right now, and some people might not think so, but those people should tweet 140 characters.
Exactly. You could still do it that way if you want to, you Twitter purists who I know are out there and have been very vocal since Twitter made that change earlier this week. Thank you, Zach. Great to share some time with you again, and we'll see you at the local courts, usually Palumbo Center, but maybe PPG Paints Arena as well, as the big city games coming up in less than a month too.
Yeah, and don't forget March Madness. The second and third rounds are coming to PPG Paints as well. It's every third year, pretty much. So it's good there, and good to be on with you as always, Matt. And I'm sure we'll touch base soon. We
shall. His name is Zach Weiss. You can find him on Twitter at Zachary. That's Zachary with a CH in the middle. M. Weiss. And he covers Duquesne basketball, men's and women's, in addition to a host of other things, including golf, via the DYST.com network. We'll be back in just a bit on Geiks Got Game.
Hi, I'm Rob Spear, host of Damn Near Killed Him, an interview show where anything goes.
Once they gave it to me, you could have stuck a telephone pole up my ass.
I was about to be, kicked out of the country.
That's where they send the worst of the worst.
In a psych ward, normal things seem so weird in there.
He was making $5,000 a month doing gay audiobooks.
Hear some stories from people who have been to the edge and back. Thursday morning at 9 a.m. on riversedgepgh.com or download on iTunes.
I mean, that's some pretty cool shit.
No character limit here on the River's Edge. I can go as long as I want, but I limit it to an hour on Geiks Got Game, just for digestibility purposes. I'm Matt Geica, your host. I'm here at Mr. Small's Theater. Always great to be here. And I want to bring in Brian Crawford, my engineer for this show, but you might know him more as the voice of River Talk on this station. Also in charge of so many of our initiatives to get the word out. And Brian, big news this weekend coming up. You've been in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You being River's Edge, and you've been in the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Well, you got Punksburg is doing a story.
Yeah, Punksburg did one.
Next Pittsburgh,
yeah.
As well. The stories are all on the new station that's being launched here, the Metal Edge.
Yes, this Sunday we are actually going to be clicking the publish button.
No, it's exciting.
Live video at riversedgepgh.com/live and metaledgepgh.com as well. So you'll be able to see us actually move the mouse and click publish live in video, and then we will have Pittsburgh's first and only metal station. But it's not just metal, it's local metal, and it's going to be broadcasting right here 24 hours a day, just like the River's Edge, all local, all original, just the same spirit, just a harder, heavier side of the network, and it's going to allow us to play a lot of bands that we can't typically play on the River's Edge stream just because we have a spectrum. So we do have metal on the River's Edge, but obviously you have to have a certain bubble that you can fit in, and there's some metal that's just so extreme, but it's such great music, and we felt bad that we couldn't include it on the regular stream, so we thought it would be a natural fit to make that our first offshoot station. It's going to be the first of many to come over the coming years.
So there you go. Look for that. Where did I read? Somewhere I read that Pittsburgh has one of the more burgeoning metal scenes as far as metal bands per capita.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was measured, but I did enjoy that particular metric. So we're right near the top, aren't we?
Yeah, third largest in the country. Believe it or not, this is one area where Cleveland has Pittsburgh beat.
Wow, Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so we need to take down Cleveland. They're in the number 1 spot.
Who's 2?
I believe it's Seattle that's number 2.
I'm sensing a theme. These cities where there isn't a lot of sunshine, more metal bands tend to grow. They're like mushrooms, you know.
Yeah.
They don't need the sun to grow. In fact, it helps when you don't have it. You get a little angry and down about the weather, and you're one of those people who doesn't like this time of the year.
Cold. Yeah, I hate.
It was sunny yesterday, but
but it was like walking through a tundra yesterday.
Yes,
it was so cold. It was miserable.
I know.
I could literally feel like the ice like clinging to my face as I walked down the cold, bitter, icy streets of Millville.
You're being very dramatic, as always. I used to live in Michigan, in Grand Rapids, where you were right on the Lake Michigan, so when the wind blew a certain way, it was going to snow, clouds were going to be there. I think Grand Rapids is one of the cloudiest cities in the country, along with Seattle and along with Pittsburgh, so I got to check to see where they rank in the metal band
that would be interesting to find out.
I'm sure they have quite a few people willing to get some frustration out via music. So we look forward to the Metal Edge. It's very exciting to see this place reproduce, if you will, to regenerate, to create a new outlet. And who's going to be running the station, though? I know that we have some
Jonathan
local folks.
Killback and Zachary Fell are the two managers. They're going to be co-station managers with the Metal Edge. They've been working on this for over a year, getting it together. And they both have a great background in it. Jonathan is in a band called Only Flesh, which, if you want to look them up, they actually do body suspensions where they have body modifiers that put hooks into their bodies so they can hang themselves from strings while they're performing their instruments, whether it be drums or guitar or whatever. And it's some really crazy stuff. They've got women that will walk on like swords and all sorts of crazy stuff while they're on air. He also was in the band The Existential Gentleman. He was the major
we have
booking
their coaster right here.
Yeah. He was the major booking person for the Millville Music Festival, so he was the mastermind behind the planning of the bands and organizing the different stages. He's going to continue in that role this year. He also was one of the organizers of Heavy Metal Monessen, which was a music festival in Monessen that we sponsored. And then Zach Fell, who is also going to be co-managing with him. He was the former station manager of WCAL, which is where I got my start in radio. And that's where I met him. He also was the founder of Heavy Metal Monessen, and he is a writer for MetalInsider.net. So some really, really talented people who are really into the scene in a big way. People know these names all across the local scene in the metal genre. So two really prominent people who have spearheaded this launch, and eventually they are going to launch their own show on the Metal Edge, which will be metal news and information in the Pittsburgh area.
I'm not part of the metal scene at all. Some of the things you told me there just surprised me and shocked me from their shows, but hey, that is very metal from what I know about it, and it's extreme. It's good to have them here, and we're looking forward to that. I did want to talk to you about one other thing that I brought up with Zach, which was the expansion of Twitter's character limit from 140 to 280. It's all arbitrary. I don't know why they started with 140 in the first place.
I don't know.
They decided to multiply it by 2 and make it 280. Are you a Twitter purist, or do you feel like the expansion is ultimately good for all of us?
Thank God they expanded.
Yeah, right?
Because I feel like it's so, like, you're trying to come up with a message and you have to rewrite it a million ways, and then you have to talk like you're in grade school in order to get your message across using abbreviated words and using numbers, like instead of actually spelling out 4, putting in the number 4. I don't like doing things like that because I feel like I feel like, well,
It's
if you listen to
childish.
my show, yeah, it's childish. And if you listen to my show, you know I'm anti-GIF, GIF, GIF, whatever you want to call it.
It's
I'm
definitely not
against
GIF, I know that,
emojis.
yeah.
Whatever it is. Oxford, the gutter of dictionaries, which has been destroying our language for years. So I'm in favor of anything that allows me to actually write a sentence and talk like an adult. I love it.
Revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
I'm all in favor. I'm glad you are too. I feel like there's a real groundswell here, or there's an unappreciated aspect of this. I've seen so much blowback on Twitter. Oh, I hate this. I'm not listening to you if you tweet past 140 characters. What's wrong with you people, first of all? And second of all, 280 characters is not that long.
Maybe they're not smart enough to actually read a sentence and they need pictures and symbols in order to get by. At least the Egyptians with hieroglyphics, there was some sort of skill required into forming those hieroglyphics. There's nothing, there is no skill, and there's no intellect in clicking a laughing, crying face. And people try to say that this is somehow an evolution in language. No, this is a devolution in language. We're going back in time, and it's really tragic to see people dumbing down and trying to frame it in some sort of altruistic sense. And if you look at the studies, even the symbols that we use in these emojis and things like that, they aren't read the same way across cultures. Like the Facebook thumbs up is extremely offensive in other cultures. So this entire idea that somehow we're coming up with this global language and we're all going to sit in a circle and sing songs together, it's rubbish. It just doesn't exist.
That's why I like this guy. Good to have you on board, Brian. Thank you for producing the show.
Sure.
Let's all take a moment to think about what he just told us and think about the greatness of 280 characters, or at least the goodness of it, and the improved nature of this social media platform. We'll be back for one last quick segment on the River's Edge. I promise it will be just a couple of moments. That's all we have left on Gike's Got Game for this week.
Hey folks, it's Mike Sasson of The Mike Sasson Show. Me and Alex, my producer extraordinaire, looked at the landscape of internet radio and figured if we want to make it, we've got to work. At least an hour earlier. Now on at 9 a.m. every Tuesday on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
Final segment of Gike's Got Game. Thank you again to Brian Crawford for producing the program and for lending his expertise in this case, social media and human communication for this edition of Gike's Got Game. I am Matt Geitka, and I appreciated having Zach Weiss on board to talk basketball. Like I said, I'm in the world of hockey a lot. Now I'm the lead Penguins reporter over at DK Pittsburgh Sports. Zach's in the basketball world a lot, especially when it comes to Duquesne. So our worlds don't really converge. And when you're following hockey as closely as I do, I don't get that much of a chance to follow basketball anymore. I used to be a much better basketball fan. I used to watch the NBA on a regular basis. I used to watch college basketball, Big Monday, Super Tuesday on ESPN. Those were staples of my viewing. But when you get, like I was saying in the opening segment, it's much easier now to really dig into one thing or the other. And in fact, you don't have time to be so knowledgeable on everything anymore. There's not the energy or the time in the day to do all that. So I've just leaned toward hockey because I've played it. I've felt more of a connection to it over the years. And so that's where I am. I don't know if that makes us better sports fans or worse sports fans. We're better in one area, but not better across the board. It all depends on what you want, I suppose. But thanks to Zach for bringing that basketball expertise to the show. We don't get a lot of that on the show. And, well, it's not going to be from the pro perspective really ever as far as the NBA is concerned. But college hoops alive and well still in Pittsburgh. And like I said, Duquesne with a chance to really make some noise this year. Let's talk some talk some baseball to finish the program. Yes, baseball. The World Series is over, and the Houston Astros are world champions. But another Texas team, the Texas Rangers, are the favorites to pick up a two-way star in baseball, the rarest of all constellations in this sport. The two-way star, Shohei Ohtani, the Japanese pitcher/slugger, is about to be posted by his club team, his pro team over there in Japan, the Nippon Ham Fighters, one of the best names over there as well in the Japanese league. But Shohei Ohtani could be the first player since Babe Ruth to make a huge impact both on the mound and at the plate. And even Babe Ruth gave up pitching after a while. So it's so difficult to do. Might be easier to do in the American League, where you can use the pitcher as a designated hitter and not have to play him in the field when he's not on the mound. So that's a possibility. It makes sense that the Rangers would go after that. But there is a tentative agreement, says Joel Sherman of the New York Post, between the Japanese League and Major League Baseball to transfer Ohtani over and make him available to be posted, which means that any MLB team can make an offer, and then the largest offer is accepted. And I believe this is a blind offer, so teams don't know what other teams are putting forward, kind of like how the Pirates got Jung-Ho Kang, who was much more of an undervalued and unknown asset when he was starring in Korea 3 years ago. And we all know how that's turned out, but Shohei Ohtani looks to be like a legitimate star and could be someone who changes the way the game is played. So I'm excited to see how this turns out, who ends up with him, and whichever team in Major League Baseball that does end up with Shohei Ohtani, how they use him. If he's in the National League, then you could see a guy much like Madison Bumgarner who can hurt you both on the mound and at the plate, and, well, maybe even more so than Bumgarner. Shohei Ohtani looks like he is good enough to be just a Major League caliber hitter and forget about the pitching, or vice versa. I think if a team is going to lean one way or the other, they'll lean toward the pitching side just because of his caliber of stuff, and pitching still remains, I would say, more valuable than hitting because the pitcher starts with the ball. The defense has the advantage in baseball. It's the only sport like it in that way. Well, if you want to count cricket, I suppose, but the only one of our major professional sports here in America, in North America, that's that way. So I would lean toward the pitching side if a team is going to make him choose, but I really hope they don't, just for all of our sakes and for the interest level that would generate to have a two-way superstar, which he could be in Major League Baseball. Thanks for listening to Gike's Got Game. Thank you for watching on Facebook Live if you did. And we have that Facebook Live stream available on our website, too, at riversedgepgh.com/live. I am Matt Geica. Thank you to everyone involved in the program once again. And I'm reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Talk to you next week from Mr. Small's Theater right here in Millvale, Pennsylvania.